They built 86 homes on my land, not by mistake, but on purpose. 3 years ago, I inherited 47 acres of forest from my grandfather. Paid off, untouched, pristine. When I finally drove out to see it again, I expected trees, silence, and the smell of pine. Instead, I found paved streets, shiny SUVs, and a "Welcome to Willow Creek Estates" sign nailed to my property line. Families were moving in, waving at me like I was the outsider. They had no idea they'd bought their dream homes on stolen soil. Each house sold for over $455,000. And the HOA? They'd spent $16 million developing it. I didn't call the cops. I just smiled, because I had the deed. When I inherited 47 acres from my grandfather, it wasn't just land, it was legacy. Pine trees, open sky, a quiet creek running through the middle of it. I still remember the smell of cedar the day he took me there when I was 15. "Daniel," he said, "never sell it. Land is the only thing they can't make more of." I didn't know then how right he'd be. 3 years passed before I returned. Work kept me busy in Denver, and I figured the property was safe, fenced, paid off, forgotten by the world. But when I drove up that mountain road again, something felt wrong. The trees were gone. The air smelled like asphalt and concrete dust. And then, over the hill, I saw it. Rows of beige, cookie-cutter homes gleaming in the sun, driveways, lawns, mailboxes, families unloading U-Hauls onto what used to be my forest. At first, I thought I had the wrong place. I pulled out my GPS, checked the coordinates. No mistake, this was my land. But instead of open fields, there were 86 homes, each one probably worth $500,000. My chest tightened as I got out of the truck and walked toward the nearest sign. It read, "Whispering Pines HOA, a Whitmore development, Karen Whitmore." I knew the name. A high-end developer and self-appointed HOA president in nearly every new neighborhood in the county. Ruthless, charming when cameras were on her, venomous when they weren't. I'd seen her in a few news segments, always smiling beside ribbon-cutting ceremonies. I stood at the edge of the pavement when a security guard in a bright vest approached me. "Sir, this is a private community," he said. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Private on my land." He blinked, unsure if I was joking. I wasn't. He called someone on the radio. Minutes later, a silver SUV rolled up. Out stepped Karen Whitmore herself. Mid-40s, sleek blazer, perfect smile. She looked at me like I was a trespasser. "Can I help you?" she asked. "You already did," I said, pointing to the ground. "You helped yourself to my property." Her smile didn't even flicker. "Oh, you must be mistaken. This land belongs to the Whispering Pines Association. Purchased legally?" "Funny," I said, "because I have the deed sitting in my safe." Karen laughed softly, then gestured toward the houses. "We've invested $16 million into this community. Roads, power, plumbing. You can't just walk in here and claim ownership." "I don't need to claim it," I told her. "I already own it." She turned serious. "Then I suggest you talk to your lawyer before you make any false accusations. Trespassing isn't a good look." I left without another word. But as I drove back down the hill, I wasn't angry, I was focused. If they built on my land, then they'd built their dreams on stolen soil. And when the truth came out, everything they poured into it, every dollar, every foundation, would collapse under the weight of a single sheet of paper. That night, I went through my grandfather's old chest, letters, receipts, maps, and there it was, the original deed, signed and notarized, dated 1968. My name had been added after probate. The coordinates matched perfectly. My hands trembled as I held it. Karen Whitmore wanted a community. She wanted power, control, image. I wanted justice. And I was going to make sure she learned what happens when you build empires on stolen ground. When I got back home that night, I didn't sleep. The anger had burned off, leaving something colder: focus. My grandfather had kept every legal paper, every transaction, every dusty file in perfect order. I turned my dining room table into a war room. Deed copies, old ledgers, plat maps, and aerial photos spread across it. I spent hours comparing coordinates, property surveys, county records. Something didn't add up. The subdivision plans filed under Whispering Pines HOA showed public land acquisition, supposedly approved through a municipal transfer, but the signatures didn't match. My grandfather's name was there, but the handwriting was off, slightly leaning left, too neat. That was when I realized they forged it. By morning, I drove to the county recorder's office downtown. The clerk, a young woman named Riley, recognized the Whitmore name immediately. Whispering Pines? Oh yeah, that development went through fast, she said. 16 million in permits, utilities, grants. Whole thing was greenlit in under a year. Greenlit by who? I asked. She shrugged. Karen Whitmore's company handled all the filings. You'd have to talk to the HOA board for more details. I smiled faintly. Oh, I plan to. Before leaving, I requested certified copies of every document with my grandfather's name on it. The more I looked, the clearer it became. They'd built an empire on a fake signature. That afternoon, I parked just outside Whispering Pines again. Families were watering lawns, kids riding bikes. Every house gleamed like a magazine cover. I watched from a distance as Karen chatted with a couple near the entrance, smiling for what looked like a realtor's drone camera hovering above. It was surreal, 86 homes standing proudly on stolen land. I snapped photos, zooming in on road signs, home numbers, even the HOA board's notice pinned on the community center wall. Every bit of it, evidence. Then came the moment I hadn't expected. As I turned to leave, I heard her voice. "Mr. Carter." Karen was walking toward me, heels clicking on the pavement. Her tone was sugar-coated, but her eyes sharp. Back again. "Are we still pretending this is your land?" "Pretending?" I said. "Funny word choice, considering your paperwork's as fake as your smile." She flinched for just a second before regaining her composure. "Careful, Daniel. You're throwing around big accusations." "I could call the police," I nodded slowly. "You should. Maybe they'll want to see the real deed," she exhaled sharply. "You're not scaring anyone. This neighborhood is staying right where it is." "Good," I said, turning back toward my truck. "I want them all here when it falls apart." That night, under a warm desk lamp, I scanned every document, built folders, labeled timelines. My printer hummed, the clock ticked, and thunder rolled somewhere far away, one of those rare Colorado storms that sound like the earth shifting. When I was done, I stared at the pile of evidence. Forged signatures, falsified permits, fraudulent deeds. All of it pointed to Karen Whitmore and her company. This wasn't going to be a shouting match over fences or lawns. This was going to be a courtroom war. And when that verdict came, she'd lose more than a neighborhood. She'd lose everything she thought she owned. By the third day, I knew exactly how I'd take her down. Not with anger, not with shouting, but with precision. My grandfather used to say, "Never wrestle pigs, Daniel. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it." So I wasn't going to wrestle Karen Whitmore. I was going to let her choke on her own paperwork. I started with a quiet visit to the county assessor's office. There, tucked behind a steel cabinet, I found the subdivision's official zoning request, and that was the golden thread. It listed Lot 12B through 98C as public trust property, transferred via legal amendment. But the amendment itself didn't exist. They'd built 86 homes on air. The clerk helping me was an older man named Mr. Shaw, the kind of civil servant who's seen everything but still enjoys a good scandal. I showed him the deed, the old maps, and the signatures. He frowned, then looked up at me. "This is bad," he muttered. "They used the county seal without an official record, so it's illegal?" He gave a small nod. "Beyond illegal. It's fraud." I walked out of that building with copies of everything, notarized, time-stamped, official. My pulse was steady. My plan was forming. Back home, I built a wall of evidence, literally. A corkboard in my office, photos of construction sites, forged papers, timelines, financial transactions. String lines connecting everything. If anyone walked in, they'd think I was tracking a serial killer. Then I made the second move, a visit to attorney Linda Graves, a quiet powerhouse in property law. She listened as I explained, her brow arching higher with every sentence. "They built what?" she said, her voice echoing in the sunlit office. 86 homes, I repeated, without owning an inch of it. And you have the original deed? I nodded, placing it gently on her desk. Her eyes widened. Daniel, do you realize what this means? They've sold stolen land. Every buyer's deed is invalid. Every mortgage is worthless. Exactly, I said. And I'm not looking for money. I want the truth out. Legally, publicly, undeniably. She leaned back, smiling faintly. You're going to make a lot of enemies. I already have one, I said. And she's standing on my property. We started drafting the case. Quiet, discreet, deliberate. She filed preliminary notices to freeze any further property sales under Whispering Pines. It didn't take long before word got back to Karen. 2 days later, as I walked out to my truck, I saw her standing by my driveway. Same SUV, same sunglasses, fake calm smile. Planning something, Daniel? She asked. Always, I said. You? Trying to stop you from embarrassing yourself. You can't win against a community this size. Karen, I said quietly, stepping closer. You built that community on lies. And lies don't stand long in daylight, she smirked. We'll see. Then she turned and walked away, heels tapping on the gravel. When I drove back to town that night, I saw it. Floodlights illuminating the Whispering Pines sign, a symbol of her arrogance, her empire. But in a few weeks, that light would turn on her, because when you build an empire on stolen ground, the foundation isn't concrete. It's paper, and I had the one paper that could bury her. The first letter went out on a Thursday morning, a formal cease and desist order drafted by my attorney, Linda. It was sent to Karen's company, the HOA board, and the county office. Nothing loud or dramatic, just a single paragraph stating that the land Whispering Pines occupied was legally mine and that further construction or sale would constitute willful trespass. By Friday afternoon, my phone lit up. Unknown number. Mr. Carter? A voice said. This is Officer Reynolds from the county precinct. We've received complaints that you're making fraudulent ownership claims. I smiled to myself. I was wondering when she'd call you. Sir? Don't worry, officer. When you show up at my place, I'll have coffee and a copy of the original deed waiting. The next morning, 2 police cruisers pulled into my driveway, lights off, just cautious professionalism. Karen's SUV followed right behind them. She stepped out first, already talking, already pointing. There! That's him! He's been harassing residents and spreading lies. I want him removed! I stepped out of my cabin slowly, holding a neat folder of documents. The officers glanced between us, clearly uneasy. Ms. Whitmore, the first officer said. We're just here to check property documentation. Let's keep things calm. Karen crossed her arms, smirking. Go ahead. Ask him to prove anything. I opened the folder, flipped to the notarized deed, and handed it over. The sunlight glinted on the official county seal. Original copy, I said. Signed by my grandfather, recorded in 1968. Never sold, never transferred. The officer adjusted his sunglasses and studied it for a long moment. This looks authentic. It is, I replied. Everything built up there, every home, every sidewalk sits on my title. Karen's expression shifted, her jaw tightening. That's ridiculous. My company purchased that land through a municipal grant. The second officer raised an eyebrow. Do you have documentation to prove that? Her pause was all the answer anyone needed. Ma'am, he said gently, we're not making decisions here, but it looks like this will need to go through the courts. Her voice rose. You can't be serious. He's lying! Do you have any idea how much money we've invested? I stayed silent. The wind rustled the grass, and a crow called from somewhere above. It was the quiet kind of justice, the kind that didn't need noise to make its point. By evening, Karen's lawyers had already called mine, threatening immediate countersuit. Linda, unfazed, laughed over the phone. Let them dig, she said. The deeper they go, the more evidence we'll find. And she was right. Over the next few days, we pulled up purchase ledgers, shell companies, and fake transfers, all tied to Karen's firm. It wasn't just fraud. It was a multi-million-dollar land scam disguised under HOA paperwork. Then the story leaked. A reporter from the local channel showed up on my porch. Mr. Carter, is it true that an HOA built 86 homes on land that was never legally theirs? I looked straight into the camera. Yes, and I have the documents to prove it. By Monday morning, Whispering Pines HOA was trending online. Drone footage of the subdivision filled the evening news, and Karen's perfect public image started to crumble. Her confident smile from the ribbon-cutting ceremonies was now plastered beside headlines like, "Luxury HOA faces land fraud allegations." Karen tried calling me that night. I didn't answer. I just watched the news in silence as a reporter stood outside her mansion, asking for comment. The silence on her end said it all. The courthouse smelled like polished wood and stale coffee. The sound of papers flipping, footsteps echoing down marble floors, the low hum of whispers, all of it pulsed in my chest like a countdown. This was it. Months of gathering documents, uncovering fraud, surviving harassment, all boiling down to one morning in courtroom 3B. Karen Whitmore was already there when I walked in. She sat at the plaintiff's table, surrounded by 3 lawyers dressed like they billed by the second. She didn't look at me. Just straight ahead, her jaw set, hands clenched together in a show of false calm. The judge entered, a tall man with silver hair and an expression that looked allergic to nonsense. "We're here to hear Carter versus Whitmore Construction and the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association," he announced, glancing down at his papers. "Mr. Carter, I understand you're asserting full ownership of the disputed property?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, standing tall. "And I have the original deed to prove it." A murmur rippled through the room. Karen's lawyers shifted uncomfortably. "Let's begin with evidence," the judge said, adjusting his glasses. Linda, my attorney, stepped forward confidently. She laid out the chain of ownership, one by one, document after document. Old land records from 1968, the notarized will of my grandfather, county tax receipts proving uninterrupted ownership. It was all there, like puzzle pieces locking into place. When the clerk handed the judge the folder, he studied it carefully. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock behind him. "This," he finally said, tapping the paper with his pen, "appears to be legitimate." Karen's lead attorney shot up. "Your Honor, we maintain that our client purchased this property in good faith from the municipality. The land was approved, zoned, and granted to us legally." Linda smiled, a shark smile. "Your Honor, may we call our witness?" An older man walked to the stand, a former county clerk named Bill Tanner. He'd retired 2 years ago but came back to testify. "The parcel was never sold to any HOA or developer," he said under oath. "The records show attempts to alter the county plat, but those entries were unauthorized." Karen's face drained of color. I saw her mouth something to her lawyer. "They said it was taken care of." Linda slid one more paper across the table. "Your Honor, this document shows the fraudulent transfer authorization. It's signed not by the county but by Ms. Whitmore's company manager." A gasp filled the room. The judge's expression hardened. "Ms. Whitmore," he said sternly, "do you have an explanation for this?" She finally looked at me for the first time. Her voice trembled. "Your Honor, I wasn't aware. My team handled the acquisitions. This is all a misunderstanding." Linda didn't let up. "A misunderstanding that cost $16 million in construction and affected 86 families?" The judge leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Ms. Whitmore, regardless of your intentions, the evidence is clear. Whispering Pines was built on land that belongs to Mr. Carter. The entire development stands on property unlawfully obtained." Karen's shoulders sagged. Her lawyer whispered something frantic in her ear, but it was useless. The verdict was already written in her expression. "Mr. Carter," the judge said, turning to me, "I'll be issuing a temporary injunction halting all sales and occupancy of homes within the Whispering Pines subdivision until restitution and ownership matters are resolved. Furthermore, the county will open an investigation into possible fraud and forgery." Karen stood up abruptly, her voice cracking. "Please, Your Honor, those families have nowhere else to go. They've already paid. You can't—" "I didn't take their homes," I said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "You did." The judge banged his gavel once. Court adjourned. As the courtroom erupted in whispers, I gathered my papers slowly. Karen collapsed back into her chair, staring blankly at the polished table, her confidence shattered. The woman who once ordered police to chase me off my own land was now trembling under the fluorescent lights, surrounded by the very lawyers who once promised her power. When I stepped outside, the air tasted different, cleaner, freer. Reporters swarmed the steps, microphones flashing, asking how it felt to win. I didn't answer. I just looked up at the courthouse facade and whispered to myself, "Grandpa, they finally learned whose land they were standing on." The following week felt like the quiet after a storm, not calm, but heavy with everything broken. My phone buzzed nonstop, reporters, lawyers, even a few Whispering Pines residents begging to talk. I didn't answer most of them. I needed silence, to breathe, to stand on my land again without hearing the echo of bulldozers. When I finally drove up the old dirt path toward my hill, the view made my chest tighten. The luxury homes shimmered in the sunlight. Rows of them. Perfect lawns, new driveways, manicured gardens. But it all sat like an illusion. Behind the beauty, there was panic. Construction trucks were gone, fences half dismantled. For sale signs, now spray-painted with the word void. Karen's empire was falling apart faster than she could control it. A few days later, the county issued the order. Whispering Pines HOA was officially suspended, their accounts frozen. The developers sued her company for fraud, and those 86 homeowners, the ones she used as pawns, wanted their money back. I didn't smile when I heard it. Justice doesn't always taste sweet. Sometimes it's just quiet satisfaction mixed with sadness for how many people got hurt along the way. But one thing felt certain. Karen finally knew what it felt like to lose something she thought she controlled. That evening, I stood at the edge of my land, the same hill that overlooked the valley where they built those homes. The sun was setting, painting everything in warm orange. I saw Karen's SUV parked at the gate. She stepped out slowly, not dressed like the iron-fisted HOA president anymore. No clipboard, no confidence, just a woman with tired eyes. She walked toward me cautiously, her heels sinking in the grass. "Daniel," she started softly, her voice rough from exhaustion. "You won. You got everything back." "I didn't win," I said calmly. "I just took back what was mine." She looked down, wringing her hands. I didn't know the full story. They told me the land was clear. I never meant for it to go this far. I crossed my arms, studying her. "You made it personal, Karen. You harassed me, called the cops on me, had me thrown off my own property. You knew something was wrong, and you ignored it because it benefited you." Tears welled in her eyes, though I didn't know if they were real or convenient. "I was wrong," she said, her voice shaking. "Everything fell apart. The HOA is gone. My company's under investigation. I lost everything." I looked out over the valley. Workers were dismantling one of the fences, the sun catching the metal glint. "You didn't lose everything, Karen," I said. "You lost what wasn't yours to begin with." She didn't respond. Her shoulders slumped and she turned back toward her SUV. I half expected her to throw one last jab, some desperate attempt to cling to power, but she didn't. For the first time since this nightmare began, Karen Whitmore walked away quietly. The next morning, the headlines read, "HOA president faces charges after land fraud exposed. Developer lawsuits mount as court sides with landowner." I sat at my dining table, sipping coffee, watching the news anchors try to summarize months of chaos into 3 sentences. They called me the man who outsmarted an HOA, but that wasn't what this was about. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about peace. I grabbed the old deed from the table, creased, yellowed, but still strong, and placed it back inside my grandfather's leather folder. He always said, "The land remembers who it belongs to." Now, I understood. As the sun climbed over the Colorado hills, light spilled across the valley, hitting the rooftops of those empty homes. For a moment, they looked beautiful again, silent monuments to greed and arrogance. But behind them, the forests were already starting to reclaim what was stolen. And me? I finally felt home again. The courtroom smelled like old wood and nerves. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, falling across the polished floor and the stacks of documents that had decided the fate of so many people. The judge's gavel came down one final time. the sound echoing like thunder. "Ownership of the property known as Whispering Pines subdivision," he said, glancing up from his papers, "is hereby restored to Mr. Daniel Carter." My breath hitched. Even though I'd known this was coming, hearing it aloud felt unreal, like reclaiming not just land, but the last piece of my grandfather's promise. The place he poured his soul into. Across the courtroom, Karen sat stiff and pale, her attorney whispering frantically beside her. Her once perfect posture was gone. The HOA badge, the clipboard, the confidence, all gone too. She didn't look powerful anymore. She looked small. I watched as the color drained from her face when the judge added, "The court also orders restitution for damages caused by unlawful construction and trespass." That was it. The empire she built on deceit had officially crumbled to dust. As people filed out of the courtroom, I stayed seated for a moment longer. Reporters murmured outside the doors, cameras flashing. But I didn't care about headlines. I just wanted to walk out of that room as Daniel Carter. Not a case number, not a story, just a man who finally got his land back. Outside, the Colorado air was cold, but sharp and pure. The kind that wakes you up, clears your thoughts. I stood on the courthouse steps, the deed folder tucked under my arm. Reporters shouted questions. How does it feel to win? What will you do with the land now? I smiled faintly. I'll let it breathe again. That night, I drove back to the property. The stars stretched wide across the dark sky. No city lights, no sounds but the rustle of leaves. The homes that were once filled with voices were now hollow shells, caught mid-construction. The HOA banners were gone, replaced with silence. I parked near the hill where my grandfather used to sit on his tractor and watch the sunset. The same hill where Karen once screamed at me, calling me a trespasser on my own soil. Now, it was just me and the wind. I walked through the empty lots, feeling the grass pushing up through cracks in the asphalt. Nature was taking back what it lost. And somehow, that felt like the truest kind of justice. A week later, I put up a new sign at the gate. It wasn't for sale. It wasn't a warning. Just 3 words, carved into cedar. Carter Land Preserve. The county approved it. The court recognized it. And for the first time in decades, this land would stay untouched, a tribute to what it was before greed paved it over. Karen sent me one last email a few months later. No excuses. No manipulation. Just a single line. I see your point now. I hope you're happy. I never replied. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I didn't need to say anything more. Some lessons don't need words. When spring came, the forest began to regrow. Birds returned. The stream that ran through the property sparkled again after years of pollution. And when I walked the trail my grandfather had once cleared, I felt him beside me. This land was more than soil. It was a story, and I'd made sure it had the ending he would have wanted. I stopped at the top of the hill and looked down over the valley. The ghostly outlines of unfinished homes sat beneath the sunrise, silent reminders of everything that had gone wrong. The golden light stretched across the hills, and the breeze carried only peace. "Grandpa," I whispered softly, "we got it back." They built on lies, and I answered with truth. They stole what my grandfather built, and I gave it back to the earth. Some battles aren't fought with fists. They're won with patience, proof, and silence. If you enjoyed this story, like, share, and subscribe for more HOA drama, where karma always finds its way home.